Welcome to R&R Living Life. After a restful night, Rick and I made ready for our Kings Canyon Rim Walk, said to be a challenging 6-kilometre loop. The walk is famous for its initial steep climb, as well as spectacular views from the rim. I was excited but a little apprehensive. The distance wasn't a worry, especially as we had hiked to Mount Kosciuszko, over twice the distance, but it was the initial steep climb up the rim that was causing me some anxiety. Heights are not something I enjoy, and with so many steep, uneven steps to begin with, without handrails, I was feeling quite nervous about how I would go. On the drive from the resort to the car park, I tried to enjoy the sunrise, but also tried hard to get my head in the right frame of mind to tackle the climb, as I knew Rick was looking forward to it. As a high rocky spur to our right closed around us, and we made our way towards the steps, I was fascinated by the early morning sunlight as it lit up the sheer rock faces around it, trying to keep my mind off what was ahead, until I saw the steps. I am truly grateful for a group of people who were older than Rick and I who began the steps just before us, as it gave me more of an incentive to make the effort and harness my fears. The start of the walk is the most difficult, with around, some say 200 steps, while others say somewhere around 500 steps to climb as it ascends to the top of the canyon. Thankfully, there were only a few others hiking this morning. That made stopping easier. Not such a good idea when I looked back the way I had come. My face had been giving me away at the discomfort I was feeling, as Rick kept stopping to reassure me that I was doing a great job. I was clinging to the path like a madwoman. In places I couldn't even think to take photos, but thankfully Rick had no issues, other than to be worried by my terrified face. Once I stopped the first time and looked down, I could not contemplate going back the way I had come. So much open space that it was just as terrifying thinking about going back, so I had no other choice but to keep going and hopefully make it to the top. I took it slowly, stopping every now and then to stop my pounding heart and wonder at what the hell I was doing. But as I stopped each time, I was captivated by the incredible views the higher up the canyon I got. Once I was at the top, what a magical experience to look out over the desert landscape and to think about what I had just achieved. I now know why it is nicknamed Heartbreak Hill, but I had made it. Now that I had done all the hard work of getting here, it was time to spend time navigating the canyon rim. Now the enjoyable part began on flatter surfaces, to stroll amongst the stunning canyon scenery. The landscape was amazing. The whole area transformed before my eyes as the sun rose higher in the sky. The palette of colours, with the red and oranges of the rocks, the various shades of green of the vegetation, and the clear blue sky above, was incredibly scenic. We followed along the western side of the canyon for a short way. The path then rises gently, and we could gain views off to the left into a side canyon before a short rocky climb that led us to a cluster of beehive domes, often called the Lost City. The domes are a result of erosion of vertical cracks in the sandstone and are old sand dunes. The cross-bedding between the domes was the result of sand being deposited in one direction by the wind. Then, with the wind change, the top of the dune was cut off and another layer was deposited in the other direction, that eventually formed cube-shaped blocks. Wind and rain gradually wore away the sides and top corners in the last 20 million years, becoming domes separated by flat rocks. Rick and I took our time just wandering through sentinel domes into a narrow path that led us past palms. We scrambled through a rocky gap and dropped into an open area. What an amazing sight! When Rick had the chance, he would walk to the edge of the cliff with vertical drops into the canyon below, but that was not for me. Even with the breathtaking views, I found it difficult to get too near the edge. The south wall of the canyon is the face of a joint which appeared in the range when it was uplifted 300 million years ago. Looking across to the other side of the canyon, you can read the history of the landscape in the layers of the rock. There was 70 to 80 metres of 330 million year old Morini sandstone on top, then a layer of hardened slate, then a 440 million year old scree slope of Carmichael sandstone. It was truly amazing. The canyon dates back to beyond 440 million years ago, when its lower level of Carmichael sandstone was first deposited. Geologists estimate that around 40 million years after this, the valley started to form by carving through the softer layers of sandstone above. The formation now beholds cliffs over 100 to 150 metres tall and broad gullies and rocky cuttings, all created through millions of years of water, wind and sand erosion. As we wandered along the track, everywhere we looked there was something of interest. Rick wandered out to the edge on one section and could see where the layers stood out above the lower scree layer. The sheer cliff face, weathered holes in places. It looked like someone had taken a knife to it and cut it straight down, while below was the head of a gully full of trees. The contrast between the tall cliffs rising above as the sun began to make its way overhead was hard to put into words as I stood and watched in wonder. The changing colours were incredible. I was constantly fascinated by the trees that were clinging to the rocks, their root systems finding that initial crack between the rocks and then to hold on and grow. There had been some rain not that long ago, as there were still some water holes, and the vegetation looked so refreshed and green. Even the spinifex with their long flower stalks looked refreshed. There were more domes, some symmetrical, while others were more weathered. The layers were fascinating. Some of the cliff faces were darker, almost black in colour, while others looked like they were made from small boulders, sculptured by erosion and worn around the edges. The swollen bulb-like formation at the base of one tree and the weathered tree roots that clung to the rocks showed the struggle they have had to maintain their grip on life. Nature sure is an astonishing thing. I sat beside a crevice that I was later to find out was a joint in the sandstone. I was amazed by how deep and straight it was. The Morini sandstone is cut by a very well-developed set of west-northwest and poorly developed set of north-northeast trending vertical joints. Erosion is proceeding along these joints. We passed a second emergency first aid box, situated in an area large enough for a helicopter to land. The first lookout was at Cottrell's Lookout. While I sat and enjoyed the scenery, Rick scrambled over rocky domes, then over a huge crevice to Cottrell's Bridge Lookout. In 1962, Jack Cottrell pioneered tourism at Kings Canyon. His son Jim and an Aboriginal man called Leslie from Docker River built a bridge across a crevice, Priscilla's Crack. It was originally made of timber and slabs of sandstone tied together with 8-gauge fencing wire. The original bridge across the crevice collapsed in 1991. From the rim, Rick had stunning views of the sheer 150-metre tall south wall, an iron-stained jutted section of the north wall, and down into the canyon. In the area were waved rocks that geologists say is evidence that the area was once the bottom of the sea. While Rick was exploring Cottrell's Lookout, a short 600-metre detour from the track, I stopped to have a rest before I wandered around the rippled rocks underfoot and marvelled at the huge deep joint I had sat beside. Here Rick was directly across from the south wall of the canyon, the face of a joint which appeared in the range when it was uplifted 300 million years ago, and the massive drop down into the canyon floor. Erosion of the Carmichael sandstone on the north side has continually undercut the Morini sandstone, eventually widening the canyon. The undercutting has resulted in some blocks of Morini sandstone which are larger than a house to tumble down to the canyon floor below. I have taken numerous photos and watched videos taken of the rim walk, and though they do in some small way show the vastness and magnitude of the canyon, they really don't do it justice. No matter how I try to explain it, words don't seem to be able to capture just how stunning and incredible Kings Canyon is, and we were only seeing a fraction of it on our hike. Once Rick returned from the small detour out to the lookout, we navigated our way between more domes, winding our way through the landscape, before descending to a wooden staircase into the vegetated gully and across a footbridge over Kings Creek, then clambered up to a junction below another staircase. We stopped on the bridge over Kings Creek to look down into the water below, and where we could see some of the different rare and relic plant species. Kings Creek runs along the bottom of the canyon and gives it its name. The creek was named by Giles in 1872. The canyon is a living plant museum, noted for its stands of cycads. We saw McDonnell Ranges cycads, a very ancient plant. Their ancestors date back 200 million years ago and were once the dominant flora on the planet. The Jurassic era of the dinosaurs was also known as the Age of Cycads. They existed before flowering plants and are often mistaken for palms. Cycads are primitive seed plants along with conifers, a group of non-flowering seed-producing plants that are evergreen. I remained at the stairs that would take us up out of the Garden of Eden, talking to a ranger, while contemplating the climb up the near straight stairs to the top of the rim, while Rick made the 600-metre journey along a gently undulating side track, past red river gums and cycads, hundreds of years old, into the Garden of Eden, a haven for plants and animals. The intermittent watercourse is surrounded by rock figs and cycads, descending into a shady pool nestled in a red rocky bowl. This permanent waterhole is at the level of the water table, where the water that has seeped into the porous Manini sandstone sits stored above a layer of impermeable shale. After heavy rain, excess water runs a short way beyond to fall into the main canyon through a narrow chasm. The climb out of the gully up a wooden staircase on the south side of the canyon was a little challenging for me. I felt like a lizard clinging to the wall. At the top of the plateau we passed one of the circuit's emergency call devices and the first aid box, the third we had seen. I felt we were now on the return journey. We continued to wander across the top of the plateau before crossing a short bridge with a one-way gate, and not far beyond this we found we were opposite Cottrell's Lookout, with a grand view down into the canyon, while further along was another viewpoint to the lip of the south wall. The path then took us away from the escarpment edge, weaving gently down between domes, over ground dotted with cycads, eucalypts and other vegetation, and across a side gully. After crossing through the gate at the end of the south wall walk, we then clambered down over more rock layers, sometimes having to make our way along a layer before we could descend, before coming out to look out across onto the sheer south wall and could see fellow hikers on Cottrell's Lookout. We could only stand and wonder at how massive the canyon was. No matter how many times we looked down into its depth, we could not be but amazed by how deep it was and how long it has taken to weather away the sandstone. No matter from what angle we have looked at it from, we were still amazed by its grandeur. It wouldn't have mattered how long we stood there and marvelled at it. It would be never enough. But as it was getting hotter, it was now time to move on. Further on we were lucky enough to come across a couple of spinifex pigeons, foraging for seeds, vegetable matter and insects in the bare areas between clumps of grasses, not far from a rocky watercourse. Further on we met the Giles track. The Rin circuit continued on to emerge into an open area at the head of Kestrel Falls, which flows after heavy rain. We took time to stop and gaze out into the sky, trying to see the Nankeen Kestrel that the falls were named after. After rain, water spilling over the cliff has cut a deep gully into the slope, where enough moisture is trapped in temporary pools to allow tall gum trees and cycads to grow. From the lookout at Kestrel Falls, the path becomes paved, making the descent to the car park quite straightforward. But by now, my legs were like jelly. Although the walk up the steep steps was challenging, I was extremely glad that I conquered them. While the descent back to the car park wasn't quite as bad, but still steep in places. Walking along the redstone paths, getting a bird's-eye view of the outback and the awesome views of the canyon walls were incredible. Its immense sandstone walls that soar hundreds of feet high, rock formations, domes, layer upon layer of sandstone, sheltering lush palm-filled rock pools at the bottom. It is a genuine oasis in the desert. That afternoon back at Gidget, Rick and I sat in the shade and reflected on our hike. This hike certainly gave us a sense of the enormous spaces that dominate the heart of the Red Centre, but vastly different to the Mount Kosciuszko hike that gave us that same sense of space, tranquility, awe and beauty. Kings Canyon is truly a very special place, one that I will remember and treasure for a very long time. Join us next time as we make our way along the Manini Loop back to Alice Springs. Give us a thumbs up if you have enjoyed this episode. Stay safe and enjoy life. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, Livin' Life.